where the percussionist is bowing on the vibraphone and playing, and then there's what, crotales?
Yeah, in the back I have the percussion section also playing some of the percussion, but it's a challenge for the soloist because he has a bow in one hand and actually two mallets in the other hand, and he's trying to do both. I mean, you imagine striking and then pulling a bow up. It doesn't happen naturally.
And there's also this really otherworldly sound, and it comes from the timpani. And tell us about this effect.
Yeah, it sounds like water kind of. It's a very light sound. You can barely hear it. It's taking a percussion instrument called a crotale. It's a little metal disc that has a very pure pitch. They place it on a timpani head. They strike that crotale, and then they just move the pedal for the timpani. And so the drum head, they call it timpano effect. The drum head moving up and down makes this wavy sort of sound. But the thing I like about it is no one's ever heard this sound effect. I stole this from George Crumb also. I think he stole it from someone too. But people in the audience always go, what the heck is that sound exactly? So.
Well, we lose a little bit of the visual. I tell you, when you see Chris on one side of the stage and the percussionist on the other, and you see him doing all this, and then also it's wild because the timpanist is kind of behind Chris. You sort of get a separation, but it's a little harder here.
And I noticed Chris actually, when he's playing this section, actually has a mallet in his teeth. So he's got several mallets in his hands and the bow and a mallet in his teeth. So he's really trying to switch things, and I was like, wow, I had not imagined the mallet in the teeth thing. That's. But he felt like he needed a different mallet for some things. And percussionists have the best sense of, they carry this big bag around. I always wonder what they do when they get on an airplane, because it's like loaded with mallets. And they're like hard mallets, soft, there's yarn, plastic, there's metal. I mean, they've got just tons of them. So a percussionist always knows what they need, but it's amazing to me that they can keep all those mallets straight.
So did you go around the house hitting things and tapping things? How did all this, to set this up? Because, I mean, before you're a flutist. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, my dad didn't like me banging on that flute. It's kind of an expensive instrument. So, actually, at Curtis, I often go down to the percussion studio when the percussionists aren't in there, and I take the mallets. They've got mallets everywhere, and I'm always tapping things to see what works, see if there's some sort of unusual sound. And if I'm not sure, I just go to the percussionist and say, I need a sound, and I try to describe it, and sometimes we can find it, and sometimes we can't. But it's also guesswork. You send the music off to the person who's supposed to be premiering it, and then you wait for the phone to ring and them to say, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? Is your metronome broken? That's usually the one you dread, the metronome broken, because it means it's just too hard. But it's actually, with Colin, I didn't hear the phone ring for like 3 weeks. I thought, oh, no, he hates it. But he actually called and said, oh, it all seems to work. And I said, you've got to be kidding. Because I've got like places where there are 3 lines going at the same time, and he's got 2 hands. So even though I wrote it, I'm wondering how the heck is he going to execute this? But he did it, and I have to say this percussionist is really pretty impressive. The mallet and the teeth, that's a first, though, I have to admit. But it really works.
Yeah. Is it fun to hear? I mean, this is the first time someone is doing it after Colin Curry, who premiered it in these different places. Right. And I guess Evelyn Glennie's going to be doing it this summer.
She's going to be doing it, yeah. Colin had an exclusivity for 2 years. No one could do it for 2 solid years. It just belonged to him. That's part of a commissioning agreement. And it's just moved off of his exclusivity. So this will be the very first
here in
time.
Harrisburg.
That's right. It's going to be, and you know what? There's a cadenza in this thing. So it was the first time I got to hear today during the dress rehearsal what Chris is doing for the cadenza, and it sounds great. It sounds really, it's so funny. You were watching the orchestra, and everyone's kind of like rocking out to Chris banging on the drums. It was really, there was a little kid running around down there on the floor. He's like, oh, I want to get up there with Chris and bang those drums. He said that to me. I'm like, I do too, actually.
Well, I happen to have part of Colin's recording, the very end of the cadenza uses, and this is to me is a neat idea, to get out of the cadenza, you actually bring back in the orchestra percussion. Which is brilliant, I think. And there's this big chord I was singing last night. One of our friends was like looking at me because I'm singing along with trombone. But was this a way to get the orchestra back, or?
Yeah, I did something unusual. Normally you have a concerto, you've got a person standing at the front of the orchestra, and then you got everyone backing up the person at the front. But I decided to use the percussion section also quite a bit in dialogue with the soloist, which is tricky because they're at the back of the orchestra and the soloist is obviously at the front. And there is a little time lag. People don't ever think about that. So I wanted them to also play in the cadenza with the soloist. So I figured I would write a beginning for them, and then I would have them kind of fade out, and then the soloist would do his own cadenza, and then I'd bring the drums back in. But that's a lot of noise, and I couldn't figure out a way to get the orchestra to sound logical, so I just had all the drummers do the very thing they love the most. They just play really loud notes all together, slowing down, going dee-dee-dee-dee, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I thought, it looks great. And they always love doing that anyway. So, but it's so dramatic. I'm often caught off guard by it because it's such a big sound. Sometimes the audience gets really carried away with the ending of that cadenza, and they start applauding before the orchestra launches back in. So I don't know where that came from. At the time I wrote that percussion concerto, I was in Italy at an artist colony, and I was agonizing about how to end the cadenza. And I thought, well, maybe loud is the answer. It is percussion, so that's what I did.
All right. Well, I'm anxious to when Evelyn does this, because percussionists, and especially her, will do very ballet. You see conductors do sort of ballets up there, and Evelyn is very good about doing these very simple things and making them look incredibly beautiful.
You never think about this when you're writing percussion concerto. You have to calculate how long it takes the percussionist to run to the next instrument, turn the page. They have to put down the mallets they were using, and they turn the page, they pick up the next set of sticks or mallets, and then they start playing, and then they have to put that down, and they run to the next station. And I literally drew a little diagram. I'm thinking, okay, I think this is how they'll have their instruments laid out. But I had to allow enough seconds for them to make the run, which usually works. Although I must confess, when we did this in London in December with Colin Curry, the violists were moved too close up to the podium. And in the performance, Colin likes to run around the podium, and he headed around, and the viola stand was right up against the conductor's podium. And there was this panicked look, because he only had 3 more seconds to get over to the other side. And he grabbed the stand and jerked it and ran around, and I thought, I'm thinking in slow motion, he's not going to make it. The whole world slowed down. It was literally only 3 seconds, but he picked up his sticks. Thank goodness he knew the piece, because he just came right in. He didn't even look at the music, and I was like, oh, I got to stop writing pieces like this that are, like a little daredevil thing. But it's kind of an Olympic event. If you really come and watch the percussionists, you won't believe how fast they have to move. And if I were them, I'd be afraid I'd go left instead of right. Do you know what I mean, to the next group of instruments? Because I know I would be panicking and go, I'm supposed to go back to the vibraphone. Oh, wait, I'm supposed to be over by the bongos. So it's quite a feat to watch.